I typically don't do response or reaction content at all, but this video reached me somehow, and while I am not a Genshin Impact player anymore, I quit the game years ago, it definitely irritated me in a way that only someone like me could speak on, which leads into a broader issue that I've been sitting on for years. If you don't know, the original video by Candybug is largely just an hour-long rant on Genshin Impact and why it doesn't appeal to her as much anymore. Most of this is how the game presents itself, the lore, character design, world building, and its writing. As controversial as most of her takes are, they are simply her opinions and I'm not here to dispute any of that. I will leave that to the actual Genshin players who know what they're talking about. The reason I made this video is largely on the accusations of racism made toward her, and honestly after seeing the video, I can see why people would think this way. What stands out the most to me is her initial points on Natlin and Sumeru.
In case you're unfamiliar, Genshin bases its nations on real-world cultures, in terms of visual inspiration, the names of the characters, and the nation's customs. Mondstadt is based largely on Germany, Liyue on China, Inazuma on Japan, and so on. Natlan, similarly to Sumeru, is based on multiple real-world cultures, including Mesoamerican societies, Polynesian cultures, and the cultures of African peoples. It's hard to pin down what they were thinking when they picked out all of these places, each so different to represent just one nation in the game. I'm certainly not the person to listen to on if this is bad representation, but I will say I do find it odd that the regions based on parts of the world where historically many black and brown people have lived are a mishmash of many different cultures, and that the characters are whitewashed versions of these people. It just gives me pause, to say the least.
What she is explaining is colorism and her point is valid. In fact, it was around the time Dendro and Sumeru was introduced that I quit the game. None of these reasons are why I quit playing, but making characters darker isn't going to bring me back either. My problem is that whenever a topic like this is ever brought up, it is almost always unanimously from the English-speaking crowd who view this purely from a Western American lens. To be more specific, it's mostly white people. The white people who genuinely think this is a problem, yet still interact with the game anyway. Why is that exactly? It's very clear after watching the entire video that she didn't make that point because she wanted more black and brown people to play the game she liked, so why bother? While her point isn't incorrect, it only amounts to a mere observation. It begs the question though, is she mentioning this because she wants proper representation, or does she want more dark-skinned folk in the game to make her feel less weird? It's not like people like this have stopped playing the game or plan to do so because of this, so I'd argue it's clearly not that big of a deal to them. Yet so many non-black folk would be the first to tell you how awkward this is. Why is it that the people who cry for representation on behalf of someone like me are also the people who feed into that problem in the first place? This sort of thing happens all the time. I'm not saying anyone is wrong for pointing it out. I'm just tired of what feels like a performance to gain social points and winning culture war arguments, opposed to seeing actual change happen. Actions of people like this never match their words, so why should I listen? Personally, I'm not so identity-obsessed with fiction that I absolutely need that representation to enjoy myself. At that point, I would be extremely miserable and find no enjoyment in this hobby. I'd be no better than the men who listen to bottom-feeder garbage like Tokon or Asmongold and whine about playing as a woman in God of War. At the end of the day, though, I understand that representation is necessary, especially for characters she mentioned who may or may not be autism-coded. However, Hoyoverse or anyone is not obligated to provide that for us. These companies don't owe us anything. I don't expect them to do so any more than I expect Marvel to keep black protagonists on screen just because I exist.
Gotta be honest, I can't see why on earth you're here.
People love me! I'm in so many movies! Hey, when are you getting another movie, huh? Oh, right.
The problem with her point for me is that it feels like she's advocating for a surface-level change over a game that she largely has structural problems with. If you watch the rest of her video, you'll hear her rant on constantly how much she dislikes characters like Varissa or Mabuika, but I don't believe she'll just make a 180 on her opinion if they were suddenly a different skin tone. This also clearly isn't a big enough problem for Hoyoverse to consider since the game is still ongoing, and the people who bring this up are still playing the game anyway. That and Hoyo's largest spenders typically aren't from the English-speaking servers and don't really care. I'm not saying having more black characters in these games is a bad thing, though I'd rather put more energy towards promoting characters like that exist in fiction with writing that actually inspire me. Like Alma from Unsighted, Eustace from Grand Blue Fantasy, Chad and Yoruichi from Bleach, Barrett from Final Fantasy VII, or even my goat, Tyon from Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and so many others. I feel like this is preferable to listening to people who I can only assume ever bring this up if the content they consume isn't validating their extremely narrow worldview in the right way. I can only assume they ever want more black characters in their game to make themselves feel less uncomfortable for playing it when they could have easily quit ages ago. At some point, this argument just feels performative, and I'm just tired of hearing it, especially from people who care more about winning social arguments over seeing actual change happen. A lot of foreign media, like anime for example, was never designed for a global audience in mind to begin with, and many fans of the medium like it specifically because it's Japanese, and not necessarily how it holds up through Western scrutiny. Demanding representation through it is pointless, especially on behalf of a group you clearly don't care for. The last thing I wanted to mention was about her follow-up video regarding her backhanded comment about Nefer.
A lot of the Notlan stuff, and also the stuff I said about Nefer, must be viewed in a historical context. Like at the end of the last video, I made kind of an offhand comment about how Nefer's plot about receiving discriminatory treatment by the academia kind of falls flat for me, and I realized after seeing a bunch of comments about that too that I should have explained myself more. I wasn't intending to imply that people with pale skin don't experience racism. That's of course something that happens a lot, but Nefer comes from an area in the game where mostly people with tanner skin live, and I know that it's implied that she's not actually from there, but I think the point still stands. In Nefer's story, she gets a chance to study at the academia, but she quickly notices that the assignments that she's been given are easier than her peers. It's obvious from the context clues here that the school sees her as less intelligent because of where she's from. This is based in real life, of course. People of minoritized races, especially black and brown people, have been historically perceived as less intelligent than fair-skinned people. There are countless examples of these groups having their intelligence and humanity undermined through incredibly racist propaganda. It's the fact that they chose Nefer as the character to experience this story out of all the people who live in the desert who have darker skin is what makes it fall flat for me.
I do like how she perfectly explained her point, but she completely fumbled it at the very end anyway. Most people might listen to this statement and think it's normal. It's not. My problem with her statement is not about whether or not white people can experience discrimination. No. My problem is that the way she worded this statement implies that the discrimination plotline falls flat for her specifically because the target of that discrimination is someone who is white and would simply make more sense in her mind if she wasn't. Look, I'm not going to be the one to call her racist, but I can't call anyone else wrong for assuming the worst either. The most I can say is that she sounds like she genuinely wants to have good intentions, but doesn't understand how damaged her worldview must be to arrive at her conclusions. This is the type of shit that irritates me the most. She seems like the type of person to play a game like Tales of Arise, a game that is quite literally about slavery, and find Dohalim to be a poorly written character because he's both a lord and also black.
I was merely thinking about you two and your sense of etiquette. Oh?
Etiquette?
Indeed. To be quite frank, I find your lack of manners to be nigh intolerable.
That's not being frank, that's being and forget it. Do we really need to talk about this now?
Yes, I find such impropriety on your parts to be deeply unsettling. It concerns me greatly.
What do you want us to do? We were slaves. We never got to learn how to be proper like you.
She seems like the type to think it's offensive to hear Wakanda forever in Japanese. She seems like the type to feel offended by the fake Italian gibberish that the Mario brothers get away with in their RPGs. I'm exaggerating at this point, but you get it by now. Not everything needs to be simplified through this narrow American view of what discrimination looks like just to affirm your own ego. Art does not need to chase white approval to be valid. That, and fiction should just be allowed to be fiction sometimes. Not everything needs to have real-world accuracy to justify itself in a fictional context. At that point, you'll probably end up with a controversy like Final Fantasy XVI, a game whose all-white cast and historical accuracy excuse feels about as short-sighted as the people they intended to sell that game to. Not saying that there's anything wrong with the game or those who like it, but I'd rather they just be honest about their target audience, opposed to creating a thinly veiled excuse to tell me that I'm not welcome. When it comes to surface-level things like sexualized female designs or fan service, I can understand her frustrations and where she's coming from, even if she has a clear bias for the male cast. Mostly because she feels objectified, and it being fiction is often the crutch used to justify it. On the other hand, it is often realism that is the excuse to justify a lot of needlessly gruesome imagery or why the KKK can exist in video games, which will continue to be downplayed by the same people who will argue for more black representation. Do you see where my problem is yet? I understand that it's realistic as Klansmen still exist in real life. Well damn, maybe they shouldn't. I don't mean to belittle how anyone else would feel about this, even if that is exactly what I'm doing. Though, living in a place like the United States that is built on the ideas of male dominance, white fragility, hating women, and subjugating minorities, it's pretty clear that these conditions favor the latter. I can understand people defending fan service in fiction as it is relatively harmless. I cannot say the same for the latter, as it goes beyond my threshold for tolerance for obvious reasons. Before anyone else says it, yes, I understand that I can just not consume the content that I don't like, which I do. Though, this ignores my point entirely, which is more about the environment white people foster that would allow such things to exist in the first place. Direct your activism to where it actually matters. I don't have anything against this candy bug person in particular. She really was just an excuse for me to rant on about this topic that I've been sitting on for years now. I could go on about how controversial the rest of her video is, but these are the only points that matter to me. If there's anything to take away from this video, it is that surface level representation without structural change is meaningless. And people, especially black people, can exist beyond pain, beyond struggle, and beyond trauma. We are better than this, we always have been.